Our status reports are built out by every step of the journey. And then programs or things that affect that step of the journey were discussed in that order. So everything always relates back to the journey. We train new franchise owners on the journey. We train new employees on the journey. All we do is talk about the journey.
Welcome to the Art of Franchise Marketing. Each episode takes a deep dive into the franchise space and explores how the biggest and best brands handle national branding, franchise development, employee recruitment, and localized marketing on a daily basis. This podcast is brought to you by Netsertive, a localized digital marketing partner for franchise networks. Netsertive's Madeleine Park talks shop with franchise executives to discuss what's working, what's not, and answers the question, what else can you be doing to excel at the art of franchise marketing?
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Art of Franchise Marketing. Today's guest is Larisa Walega from Ziebart. She is the VP of Marketing. I'm super excited to talk to her. We just did a webinar recently, and after the webinar, I was like, yep, need her. Filled with information. So without further ado, we will go ahead and pass it to Larisa. What is your background? Give me a peek into your career. How'd you get to the space you're at now?
Sure. Well, thanks, number one, for having me. I'm super excited to be here. Super big fan. Career start, where to start? Well, I won't sugarcoat it. I actually just got my 20-year graduation notice from my college. I graduated from Adrian College. So I remember those days that I was like, oh, I wonder how I feel, right? Like 20 years later. And, when you're like, oh, you've heard those people say, I have 20 years of experience. And you're like, oh, wow.
I have
that's hardcore. Now I'm saying I got 20 years of experience. But either way, very interesting start. Like I said, I graduated from Adrian College. Funny enough, I don't tell this story enough, but my degree is actually in performing arts management. So it was half arts classes and half marketing management and all the things classes. Because my original intent, I danced my whole life since I was 3. I competed in middle school and high school. I danced in college, and I love the arts. I think that there's a strong connection between the arts and marketing as creative disciplines. And you see a lot of people who started in the arts that if they didn't go into that professionally as a dancer or singer or whatever, they ended up going into marketing and advertising. I could give you like a slew list of people, but that's another day. But either way, so my initial thought was I wanted to own my own performing arts center. I had my first female mentor was in that space. Her name's Deborah Grusa. She still owns the largest performing arts center in Michigan here. And she really inspired me. My first female inspiration from a leadership standpoint was her. And so she believed in me, and that was a great time. But after I graduated, I did work for her for 2 years as a marketing coordinator, but I realized I really loved marketing and advertising, and it didn't really matter what the space was. And so I transitioned into a role at Campbell Ewald, which is one of the larger advertising agencies here in Michigan. Chevrolet was their client, lots of automotive here in Metro Detroit. And I worked there and learned kind of just from the ground up how everything worked together. Always, in mentoring whenever I can and giving back. I do recommend at some point in your career, if you want to be a very strong marketer, having both those sides of the client side and the agency side really gives you the full spectrum of how things work together. So I was fortunate early on in my career that that's what I did for about 6-7 years. And then I came to Ziebart, and I started as a local store promotions manager, Region 1. I had the longest title ever of anybody here, I think, but I did that. And then, so that was, again, groundwork, ground up. Another thing too, it can be hard to be the field marketing manager and be the connection between marketing and the franchise owner. But wow, did it teach me so much about franchising. And I would never regret that time as well. And built a lot of the relationships that I still do have with franchise owners today here by doing so. So did that for a couple of years and then moved into the director of marketing role. And what I love to talk about at that point was not just building the team. And I know we'll talk about that a little bit later too, but I really had the opportunity to help reintroduce the brand. So leading a whole brand reintroduction by starting with research, developing customer journeys, developing personas, authoring extensive marketing plans. That position gave me the opportunity to do that. And so I was very grateful for that. And then during the pandemic, crazy
Well,
enough,
that little thing.
that little thing, came in one day and then got the promotion to vice president of marketing. So was beyond grateful for that during that time as well too. And just continue now to help and be a voice for customers, all of our customer groups that we'll maybe talk about a little bit later too, but be that voice and really educate on what we can do for franchise owners, what we can do for customers interested in keeping their vehicle looking like new and extending its life to creating a career for our employees and beyond. So I would say that's the path that happened. Many other steps in between there, but that's
the long and short of it. Well, two things. One, I hope you go to your 20-year reunion because you'd walk in like an absolute boss. And then two, I mean, I haven't heard of anyone that has done this before, but performing arts and business to end up in franchising just seems like no wonder you're so successful, because that's what franchising is. A little bit of a circus, a little bit of a shit show, a little bit of
everything.
A little bit of everything. Well, that's great. And then for our listeners who aren't sure about Ziebart, why don't you tell us a little bit about the brand, what you guys do, and what your growth goals are right now?
Sure, no problem. So Ziebart, I don't know why I start off this way, but I always do. So we are one of the older legacy brands of the International Franchising Association. We're actually number 81 on the list of members, founding members of the association. So we're very proud of that, but we've been around for over 60 years. Like I said, one of the first franchising concepts in the world. We're an automotive aftermarket and appearance franchise. We have over 400 locations in 37 countries with partnerships with car dealers that give us right around 1,200 or so different types of service center and processing centers. So very diverse in the services that we provide, but the ultimate goal is to, like I said, extend the life of your vehicle, make it feel like new, make it look like new. It's an interesting audience of people that we have that are interested in doing that. I can use myself as one of those personas, but the mom who's very busy and really just cares about clean and tidy within her vehicle, to automotive enthusiasts who care about the outside of their vehicle and what it looks like and almost kind of view it as an extension of who they are. We run the gamut of people, but you definitely are interested in either protecting or making your car look like new again. So
that's awesome. And I fall into that first bucket where I'm like, please just don't spill the juice box again. Don't do it. Don't do it. Yeah. Well, then that will lead us perfectly into our first discussion, is the nuances of your industry. And I'm excited to hear this because your industry is like a beast. Automotive is insane. Like, I don't dabble in it at all. So what are some obstacles you face while marketing? Because as a huge legacy brand, you've got all of your target markets. You also have the automotive dealerships, which is more like, I would guess, B2B kind of. So, how do you stand out in the crowd? You guys clearly are not just a car wash. You're also not an automotive shop. So how do you make that known? And then also, really penetrate all of the markets?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll take that kind of in two phases. One, from the business angle, but then two, from the marketer angle. And we'll actually start with the marketer angle. So as you said, franchising is a beast and different in itself. And I find that a lot of the people that we talk to all the time, right? Being a marketer in franchising is probably one of the toughest jobs ever, because not only are you trying to stay ahead of the curve from a franchising standpoint, what's going on in the industry, how are things and are they affecting your business? But then you've got your own niche of your own industry, right? So I'm in automotive, people are in cleaning, there's restaurants, and you're staying on top of that niche as well too. But then, oh, by the way, you're also a marketer. So you're trying to stay ahead of that curve as well. So and then even in my own industry, not only is it franchising, automotive, and marketing, but we're aftermarket. And that's a completely different space in automotive too. So, trying to stay ahead of all the things and picking and choosing where you're focusing on and really making sure that you're staying ahead of the curve. I've found that as something that has inspired me to continue to move on and grow within my career, is just making sure you're not going to know everything, and you don't need to, because you have a team, not only your own marketing team, but your team within your company and your brand. But being able to stay ahead of the things that make a difference there have always helped me from a marketer standpoint. From our industry, that gets even more complicated because we are a very diverse brand. Not only we are founded on rust protection, primarily in the Midwest. 1959, Kurt Ziebart invented it. His family is still very proud of his legacy today. We continue to talk to them all the time, and they're so sweet. But not only we're founded on rust protection and the service, but then we're also, like you said, in the cleaning service, and we detail, and then we use products and services that essentially protect that clean aspect too. So detailing is another major segment of our business. Then we've got window tint. We tint cars, and we use different types of film to protect the car. So those three segments of our business, just like the International Franchising Association is there to help franchise brands move forward, we're also members of the International Car Wash Association, the International Detailing Association, and the International Window Film Association. So
I love that those even exist. Like, obviously they do, but like, I want to be a part of the International Window Tinting Association.
Right. So it keeps going, but that really, comes back to our CEO recently retired, and we're fortunate that his son took over in the position. But this has been a consistent phase, or a consistent theme, if you will, that you can see, is that we're just so grateful to be able to have the opportunity to stay ahead of the curve, which I think has really helped put our brand and moved our brand forward. It's continued to place us as the number one automotive appearance protection brand, the Entrepreneur 500. We moved up dramatic spots this year from last year to this year. So we just, taking pride in knowing what's happening right now and what could be ahead of the curve is something that I think has not only driven the brand forward, but tried to drive me forward as a marketer too.
That's such a great answer. And I think, I'm so glad you're on this podcast. Was the reason I created it was because I was like, I don't think we get enough appreciation. Obviously, I made it out of like self love. And, but I was like, we have to go from localized employee marketing to like brand scale international within like 10 minutes of a meeting.
Right.
And like, that's insane to think about. So, when you think of obstacles, you're like, there's always going to be obstacles. There's going to be obstacles all the time, whether it's small or large, but making sure you have the network you need, the foundation of your team. And then, personally, continuing to educate, I think is super important. So then how do you think Fran Dev plays into that? Because now you're also added of, I also need to find owners. So with that, is that something that comes naturally to your brand because it's kind of a legacy and everyone understands it? Or do you guys still need to work at it?
Oh, we definitely still need to work at it. I think as probably most brands do. But I think what's fortunate, and it can be, it's not the natural thing that you learned in college, or maybe even that you had experience in, perhaps, unless you grew up in a franchise brand, right? So it's something that you kind of have to learn, and it can be daunting and, quite honestly, scary at times when you think about license agreements and franchise disclosure documents and joint employer and all the things. Like, you're like, what? I don't even, but the way that I approached it, and I haven't been with it the entire time that I've been at Ziebart. In fact, it's a fairly recent addition to my responsibilities, but the way that I've approached it that made it seem a little bit less daunting and frankly just as fun as any other vertical of our business is it's kind of apply the same marketing principles and you just roll, right? So, understanding, number one, what your positioning is and how it's different from a franchise development or a franchise ownership experience is so key. And then from there, understanding who your personas are and who your target audience is and what's important to them, and developing the messages that, make sense and can make those connections too, and building a customer journey as well too. And then what are the messages that go at each step? It was not like reinventing the wheel here. It was the same thing that we've done with the brand, with our retail experience, with other brands that I've worked on. It's really the same thing. So I've tried to help tell that story whenever I can, because I think when somebody moves into this position and they get that responsibility of, you're really the marketing expert across everything that we have, and you're saying, but I didn't work in franchising like for the last 15 years. I don't know what you're talking about. No, you just have to understand it, learn it, what makes sense, what doesn't, position yourself correctly, and it all falls into place. Is it perfect? I am definitely not saying it's perfect. And we always have things that we're relooking at, optimizing the journey, changing the messages. We look every year, has the persona changed? We revisit those things every year, but it's fun.
And I'm so glad you told that story, because I think when people think of Fran Dev, they make it something completely separate. And it's not. It's, it's a consumer buying a product / service. This happens to be a business, and they've got a different persona and a higher investment level than normally a regular consumer. So, approaching it that way, and just, understanding that it's just gonna take time, and you have to keep revisiting it. And I'm so glad you said that, because I hear a lot of smaller brands think, well, once I get 400 locations, it'll be easy. Once I hit 50, once I'm as big as Ziebart, then I won't have to try and they'll come to me. No, it doesn't matter what size you are. You always have to continue marketing.
Right. It's just like my consumer brand right now. We could talk about like what's hot, what's happening now, how is our business doing, fared very well through the pandemic. We pivoted just like everybody else, and we first took the stab at what could we do to help our communities. Well, the only service we really have that could help was interior detailing. And so many of our franchise owners and corporate locations provided free wipe downs to first responder vehicles for a good month or 2 or 3 at the very start of it. And we just did that. And that was it. There wasn't a lot of sales coming in, but that's okay. Like, we did what we had to do. That's always been a part of the brand, is rolling up our sleeves and just helping wherever we can. But now we fast forward to April 2022. And, as we were saying, just like with franchise development, you have to stay on top of what's going on, and your message has to be able to pivot. And my message since March of, I don't remember what year that was. It feels like it was yesterday. Was in 2019, 20. I don't know. I get confused because it's all together at this point. But since then, my message has probably pivoted 4 times. And fortunately or unfortunately, again, as you asked in the beginning, it's based on the automotive market and what's happening with vehicle sales, and how consumers are either buying more, buying less. What are they buying? Is, electric versus gas important to them? Like, it's just, the message has to keep on changing with what's relevant to what consumers are doing. So it's the same thing in franchise development. Who is that person? How have they changed? Are they ready to, be their own boss? Are they ready to make a career change? Are they ready to buy a franchise and pass it down and create a legacy? That's a huge thing in Ziebart too. So, it all rolls together.
And I think there's something to note here that, for our listeners, is that, as Larisa mentioned, her messaging in the last 4 years, 2 years, whenever the pandemic started, has changed about 4 times. Now, that's not saying that her brand mission or the brand promise is changing. It's just the language that you're using. Think of it as a campaign to, hit sales goals. So you're not changing your branding. You're not changing your message or your promise. You're changing the messaging that's going to resonate with your listener, or your listeners, obviously, your clients.
I could not agree more. And you know what? You're getting like first crack dibs here at this information. But so another really fortunate thing that I have here is a leadership team that believes in research. And I've been very fortunate to get a budget to not only when I started that brand repositioning as the director of marketing, which was 2017, but I just got the budget to refresh it all. And I just saw the results last week. And what I can tell you is that exactly what you just said: mission, vision, values, positioning, promise. None of those things have changed. They've remained relevant. If we saw a need to change, we would, but they've remained relevant from 2017 to now. Things that have changed, though, are customers' needs, customers' wants, their vision and their purpose for keeping their vehicle looking like new or keeping it clean, how they use it, their thoughts on how long they're going to keep it. All of those things may have shifted, but that's consumer marketing. That's not, the overall brand positioning and branding of the company remains steady. And we're very fortunate for that.
Yeah, that's incredible. And that's how the brand is built on a good foundation, when you can look back 60, 100 years and be like, yeah, we really haven't changed that much. We're still good people doing good work.
Right, exactly.
So I'm excited to dive into this because Larisa actually recommended we talk about this, is your customer research and how that leads into the journey management. So kind of take me through that, because I think a lot of people just, for lack of better terms, just don't do enough due diligence, or it's kind of the boring stuff, right? The research, you just want to get out there and start making money. So they think, oh, here's a couple of my personas, or here's what I think my customer is. Why aren't they buying? Why isn't it they see my logo and then they buy? So take me through kind of your research and thought process there, and how, Ziebart does that.
Yeah. So like I said, we started this whole process in 2016, 15, where, we knew that we needed to take a step back and understand where the brand was laying in terms of consumer interest, in terms of our competitors, in terms of automotive landscape overall, and then automotive aftermarket, again, all the layers. So when we did that, and, I'll be a little bit more even tactical here too, we hired an outside agency to do so, because research like that, I mean, unless you have somebody and amazing mega resources internally, it is very hard to do yourself at all. So we hired an agency, and, we went through our goals through that research, which was to, again, understand where Ziebart was positioned in both our consumers and potential consumers' minds, to help us just develop our positioning for the future. We looked at how all of our services played out in their minds, talked about services they were interested in, they might have not purchased yet, to develop journey management as well. So, and then to develop an overall journey and those personas as well. So we really were starting from scratch. We did all that. If I didn't have that right now, I know that myself and my team would not be as successful as we are. That was the foundation for reintroducing this brand and growing as steadily as we have in the past 5 years. So we did that, and then we just redid it. And, like I said, fortunately, it's not like you're reinventing the wheel every year, but it's a nice refresh to understand. And my personas have changed, and I can't get into it too much because I haven't shared it with the leadership team yet either, because we have so many things on our plate. But I will say that they have changed a bit, and it's exciting. It's so, like you were talking about, oh, research is the boring part, whatever. I think it's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. I'm sitting there in the room, they're presenting it to me. I'm like, I'm on the edge of my seat, like, oh, really? Yeah, I'm taking so many notes. Like,
yeah, that's why you're the VP of marketing and I am the podcast host, because you do the research and I just jump right in.
I love it. It's so great. It gets into, it gives you such a roadmap and a foundation of where to go. If I didn't have that, it'd be a lot of work. That's for sure. So
for people listening and they're like, okay, she said it, she means it, I got to do it. What would you suggest is their first step into creating this customer journey? What do you think they should research? What, should they do it internally? What is your suggestions around that?
I'll give you both, because I actually recently had this conversation with someone too, who asked me for some advice on that. So there's two schools of thought here, right? You basically either have a budget or you don't. as a marketer. Okay. There's nothing in between.
I don't think that's a thought. I just think that that's a fact.
Yeah, it's a fact. True. It's a fact. So we'll start with the latter. If you really just don't have a budget to be able to get assistance in doing that, then my advice would be, because I've done this both ways now here too.
Mhm.
My advice would be is to, one, bring together the right people in the room. And for us, it was marketing, field marketing, it was sales and operations, maybe even if you have an IT team as well too, someone represented there too. And I know this sounds like old school, but like we just whiteboarded it. We had like a workshop and we just started and we just talked about it. Like, okay, using the basic principles of marketing, how do people become aware of us? What do they do? Where are they going? Okay, great. What do they want to know? All right. But even before that, what are their triggers, right? What's triggering them to, maybe we'll use the example of buy a franchise. What are those, tenants? And then, again, using that basic kind of marketing principles, I became aware of you. I might have researched you. Why are they choosing me? Right. And then building upon what the messages are, where they go to do that, what you're going to measure at each of those steps too. Often you might make all these great notes and then say, oh, if I can't measure that, it's out the door.
Right.
So building that there, but then it becomes so helpful because, right, marketing's about building brand awareness and creating leads. Okay, well, what happens after that? Now the sales team comes in and they start talking about what are the conversations that are happening, which can apply to anything: brand, retail, service, franchise development, same thing, and then taking it from there. So that would be my advice to someone who doesn't have a budget to be able to work with that. Simply using your own team and outlining it and making sure you decided and agreed upon the steps, what the message are, what the tactics are, and how you're going to measure it is a great start into journey creation. If you do have a budget and you do have the dough,
You're the fancy people.
and you're the fancy people, then, finding the right researcher can really help you build that because they'll know how to do that. And oftentimes they're probably coupling that with larger brand. And we were fortunate that's where our start happened, from our brand and retail side too. So finding the right partner, and again, using your network in franchising or out, although we love our franchise people, it goes good.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said for, on the no budget side, nobody knows your brand better than you. So, that you are your best resource. But also on the flip side, there is a bonus to having a step outward. Okay?
Right.
You're going to think of things you might not think. Sometimes you're just too close to it to see. So definitely bonus on that side.
Yes.
And then I have to ask you the question of, what are your suggestions into implementing the journey? Because a lot of people will make the personas, they'll have the personas, maybe they'll have some messaging, and then it sits in a folder in the desktop, and people just kind of allude to it sometimes, but it doesn't really take any sort of real effect in terms of the sales process. So what are your suggestions into making sure that it's used after you create it?
So I have two suggestions. One, when I started created my first journey here at Ziebart, I actually aligned my team against that journey. So I had two marketing leads, one that was in charge of one half and one that was in charge of the other half. And then everybody fell underneath them, programs, things that we needed, whether they were existing or creating new. And that really put a focus on the fact that the journey was the thing that drove us within this business every day. So if it didn't fall into building or optimizing that journey, we just didn't do it then. It wasn't a priority. So yeah, that really helped. And now that we've had these journeys for a while and they change and we optimize and grow against them too, it's really all about, for me anyway, continuing to manage the team against that. That structure has changed with those two leads. We don't have that structure anymore because it wasn't needed. But now we focus our attention on every other week. Our marketing team meets together. Our status reports. I know it's like people are like, do we really have to meet about things? But I'm telling you, it keeps everybody on track. Our status reports are built out by every step of the journey. And then programs or things that affect that step of the journey were discussed in that order. So everything always relates back to the journey. We train new franchise owners on the journey. We train new employees on the journey. All we do is talk about the journey. And that's how it remains relevant. And I'll say, I'm sorry, I had a third thing. I always end up adding more.
Please don't say sorry when you have more to say on a podcast.
But aligning hand in hand with sales and operations is probably the number one thing. Making sure
And
that
the hardest.
and the hardest, yes. But making sure that we're from the start, when it rolled out, it was explained, it was agreed upon, and we manage against it too together has been very key too.
Very cool. And yeah, I think it's important to note too that you don't have to be starting from the ground up to implement this or start this. You can do it with what you have now. It's just, making something more of a key focus, and then people are going to kind of magnetize and, adapt accordingly. So while for the type A people like me, it's just like, oh, let's just wipe it clean and build it from the ground up. You got to be flexible and do it that way. And do you do this for all three of your core customer groups, meaning their employees, your owners, and your customers?
Yes. Some, I will admit, we are stronger than others in, and some need more attention than others at this point. But again, that's just prioritization, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say, and I would bet, based on talking with our other franchise marketing friends too, that if you ask them right now, what's the one thing they wish they had more time to focus on, but perhaps they don't, or now they've kind of realized I really need to, it would be the employee journey. And that's a really hard one, right? Because we have to draw a line in franchising of what that means, how we support. But from an employee branding standpoint, I think that's some of our focus is going to begin to turn to. We weren't hit as hard as some other industries in terms of labor, but now we're starting to see that a little bit more. And so, we do, to answer your question, yes, we do create these journeys and create positioning and really think through what makes sense for each customer group. And the employee one is a little not challenging, but different in the way that as a member of the leadership team, I'm thinking about all of the employees here at our world headquarters. But then I'm also thinking about where I can, how can I support employee branding for our franchise owners so that they can attract and retain employees for their own stores. And again, that's very hard to do. And we, follow the system and follow the regulations set forth from a franchising standpoint. But there's a lot to, I think, unpack there. And that seems to be, like I said, some brands are already ahead of this curve because they had to be, because labor, I'm sure restaurants, probably one of the harder hits. It hasn't been as big of a hit for us, but it's starting to become a little bit more of a concern that we want to focus on that too.
Yeah. And I co-own a whole bunch of home service brands, and one of our main one is Made Pro, and we are having the hardest time finding home cleaning professionals. And, I was talking to my husband the other day, and I said, the issue is not our culture isn't good enough. We're not marketing enough. The brand isn't good enough. The problem is everyone needs employees and everyone can offer something different.
Right.
So you still can do everything right, and it's still going to be a hustle. And I think that's what a lot of people are starting to now understand is you have to continue marketing for employees like all the time, not wait until you're turning down business, and also understand that you can be doing everything right and still just have to continue at it, because that's kind of what marketing is. And so now people are realizing, well, we have to do it on a day-to-day basis.
Right. Welcome to our world.
Yeah. Actually, it's perfect timing into our kind of final discussion. And you talked on this before, but outsourcing versus internal. I've talked to so many brands. Some of them are like, build it or buy it. We're always building it. I don't care how long it takes. I have some that are like, outsource everything. I'm free. And then there's, the mix. So where do you stand on that scale? Has it changed over time? And when do you know that you got to make that decision?
I think that the decision, unfortunately, rests specifically on what the need is. The marketing department specifically here, we started with when I came on board, a director of marketing, raise your hand, the field marketer, and a graphic designer, and now we're up to 10. And I think there are certain aspects of the marketing team that if you're, I used to say sitting here every day, which we're not, but if you're sitting in it and you're working in it on a day to day, I just feel like there's certain positions that can really lend to greater involvement and greater results by being on the team and being here, integrated into it from a day-to-day standpoint. The team is composed of a digital marketing manager, a field marketing manager, kind of a lead over all of those things, a social media manager, a communications manager. We have a creative director, 2 graphic designers, and a video editor. So, and it's not to say that because that's their role that they take over everything. Because the one thing that I always instill in the team is that it's okay to not be able to do something. It's okay to say, you know what, this would be best suited for us to get some outside advice. There's nothing wrong with that. That's perfect. Thank you for being honest about that. Let's look into the resources that we can to utilize that. Clearly the research, I would have never done that internally, like outside, resources to sort of build that in. We don't have the infrastructure to do that. From the marketing angle, that's how I feel about that. And I think the only other department within our brand that we make decisions like that is in our information technology team too. And we're very blessed to have a very talented team who literally built our point of sale from the ground up. Like, it's called Ziebart lovingly, and it's amazing. So, nobody from the outside, I think, could have came in and done that without having knowledge really of what's important to our franchise owners to run their business, what's important from the customer experience to make the point of sale easy and efficient to get through our stores. So it really just boils, to me, I know that's kind of like a loaded answer, but it really just boils down to what you're doing and how it relates to growing the business. I would say the only other angle with that to look at would be time.
Right.
So, if on top of all the other responsibilities that a team has internally for a brand, do you have the time to do it? Because if you don't, and you can also get something more efficiently done outward, something to take into consideration.
Yeah. And I think that is a terrific answer, because what it really boils down to is do what's right for your brand at the time.
Right.
Whatever something you implemented 60 years ago, it's probably evolved since then, and as budgets grow, your team's growing. So something that, like, to your point, with time and money, something you might have to use a supplier for in the beginning might be something eventually you take in-house. So these, it doesn't have to be one way or the other, and it is going to change. So making sure that it's right for your team and your brand, with a big emphasis on making sure the vendor partner is correct. I've had experience choosing the vendors because they were the fancy ones or the ones that were the cheapest. And all I have to say about that is, as I'm sure you have, like, if you're going to fail fast, cut them loose, don't hang on to them. There's so many people out there that can help, and so many companies in every sort of nook and cranny of business that, making sure you find the one that you trust your franchisees with. I think that at the end of the day, I've heard a lot of brands be like, well, I'd never let this vendor talk to our franchisees. I'm like, well, then they shouldn't be a vendor.
Right. Exactly. Measure the results. If they're, it boils down to results. And if the results aren't there, then peel back whatever else might not be working, give them an opportunity to fix it. But, some fit and some don't.
Exactly. We are almost up on time, but I have 2 final questions that are 2-parters that are our listeners' favorite, as I always say. So first one, how would you define success as a franchisor? And does that differ from how you would define success as a franchisee?
I would define success as a franchisor. Franchisees, invest in us, 1, for our brand, 2, for our standards and operations and our processes, and I think 3, for the team that they have. So all 3 of those things equally fall on both sides. Obviously, for our franchisees, we want them to have success. We want them to have the life that they want to have, and as to why, fulfill those goals as to why they first invested in our franchise. But at the same time, from the franchisor standpoint too, we want that success for the employees within this company too, from our world headquarters standpoint, and all those same ideals and goals apply. So I would say I see them all as one. I really don't see them as two different. I think they both work together. And if they're not working together, then there's a problem.
I love that. And one of our guests earlier had said it has to be a win-win situation. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So exactly to your point there. And then the final piece, if you could give a piece of advice to a franchisor team, what would it be? And what would your piece of advice be to franchisees?
My piece of advice to franchisor teams would be to make sure that you're constantly measuring your relationship with your three customer groups: your employees of your brand at your world headquarters, your franchise owners, and whatever type of customers, retail, service, B2B, B2C, all the things.
ABCD.
Hey, making sure that you're measuring all of those relationships, because marketing is about building relationships. And if you don't know what's going on, where the good parts are, where the not so good parts are, and where you can optimize to make those better, the foundation of your brand is built on those relationships. So that would be my advice from a franchisor standpoint. That isn't really just marketing advice, but holistic business advice too. And from a franchisee standpoint, I would say the same thing too, in a way. I think that you understanding, but at your level, down to your level, store level, multi-store level, multi-unit level, whatever the case may be, multi-territories, understanding the same thing, you can't gain the success that you want without also understanding, how do your employees feel about, their experience with your stores or your brand or whatever you're doing, and how do your customers feel as well? And would you want to do business at your location? Would you want to work at your location? Asking those questions, those two groups are so important for growth for yourself. And those, again, the win-win, working together, it kind of all intertwines.
I love that. And what a better way to go out, because I would look at this, and I was for very many years on the brand side. And so I'd look at this question, and my response was, well, my advice to franchisees would be, don't be annoying. And my advice to corporate franchisors team would be, don't annoy. So now I'm just pointing at myself, feeling like, oh, don't be annoying. But again, much better said from Larisa, which is why we have her on. So thank you again, Larisa, for coming on. If you guys want to connect with her, it's Larisa Walega. She's on LinkedIn. And obviously check out Ziebart. I'm sure there's one near you. Thank you again. And we loved having you on The Art of Franchise Marketing.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to The Art of Franchise Marketing. This show is brought to you by Netsertive. We help franchise brands and multi-location businesses run localized digital marketing at scale. To learn more, visit netsertive.com.